The email from HR arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Subject line, immediate suspension pending investigation. I stared at my laptop screen in the dim light of our home office, reading words that made no sense. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all duties at Horizon Property Solutions. You are prohibited from entering company premises or contacting clients until further notice. Allegations of misconduct and financial irregularities require immediate review. My name is Daniel Westbrook. I'm 41 years old, and until that moment, I'd been the chief operations officer at my wife's real estate technology company for 8 years. Not just any company. Horizon Property Solutions was valued at $180 million, employed 340 people across 6 states, and was about to close a Series C funding round that would push us past the $250 million mark. My wife, Victoria Westbrook, was the CEO and founder, the brilliant mind behind the platform that revolutionized how commercial real estate deals got structured. And apparently, she'd just fired me via email at midnight without a conversation, without a warning, without even the courtesy of a phone call. I walked upstairs to our bedroom. Victoria was still awake, laptop balanced on her knees, wearing the silk pajamas I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 months ago. She didn't look up when I entered. "Victoria," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "I just got an email from HR." "I know," she replied, still not meeting my eyes. Her fingers continued typing, the clicking sound filling the silence between us. "We'll discuss it tomorrow." "We'll discuss it now," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "What the hell is going on?" She finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes made my blood run cold. Not anger, not confusion, but absolute certainty. Like she'd already tried and convicted me in some private court I didn't know existed. "Carter showed me everything," Victoria said, closing her laptop with a decisive snap. "The offshore accounts, the kickback arrangements with vendors, the falsified expense reports. 8 years, Daniel. 8 years you've been stealing from the company. From me." Carter Brennan, the new intern she'd hired 6 weeks ago. Fresh out of Stanford Business School with an MBA and apparently a talent for destruction. He was 26 years old, ambitious, and had somehow convinced my wife of 12 years that I was a criminal. "Victoria, that's insane," I said, my heart pounding. "I haven't stolen anything. Whatever Carter showed you, it's wrong. Let me see the evidence." "The evidence is being reviewed by our legal team," she said coldly. "You'll receive everything through proper channels. Right now, I need you to leave." I stared at her. "Leave? This is our house. It's my house, Daniel. I bought it before we got married, remember? And right now I can't stand to look at you." Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion breaking through her corporate facade. "How could you do this to me? To us? To everything we built together?" "I didn't do anything," I said, standing up. "Victoria, please, just talk to me like your husband instead of like some employee you're firing." "You're both," she said. "And right now, I can't separate the two. So I need you to pack a bag and go. We'll figure out the rest later." I stood there for a long moment, looking at the woman I'd shared my life with for over a decade. The woman I'd supported through 3 failed startups before Horizon finally took off. The woman I'd worked beside 80-hour weeks, sacrificing friendships and hobbies and personal dreams to help build her vision. And she was throwing me out based on the word of an intern she'd known for 6 weeks. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll pack a bag. But Victoria, when you figure out the truth, don't expect me to just come back like nothing happened." She turned away from me, opening her laptop again. "Just go, Daniel." I packed enough clothes for a week and drove to a Marriott downtown. The whole time, my mind was racing through the past 6 weeks, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Carter Brennan had arrived in early September, introduced by one of Victoria's investor friends as a rising star who needed real-world experience before launching his own venture. He was handsome in that polished MBA way, with perfectly styled hair and suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Victoria had been immediately impressed by his credentials, his analysis of our market position, his ideas for expansion. I'd been cautious from the start. Something about Carter felt off, the way he asked questions that seemed designed to expose weakness rather than understand process. The way he'd spend hours alone with Victoria, reviewing financials and strategy documents that normally I'd be part of discussing. The way he'd smile at me in meetings with an expression that wasn't quite friendly. But I'd chalked it up to my own insecurity. Victoria was brilliant and attractive, and I was 15 years into a career that had made me comfortable but not particularly ambitious. Of course, a young hotshot from Stanford would make me feel inadequate. That was my problem, not his. Now, sitting in a hotel room that smelled like industrial cleaner and loneliness, I realized my instincts had been right. Carter Brennan hadn't come to Horizon to learn. He'd come to destroy. And he'd chosen me as his target. The question was why. If you're finding this story compelling, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Your support helps us continue bringing these real-life stories of betrayal and justice to light. And don't forget to like this video so others can find it too. I spent the next 3 days in that hotel room, working from my laptop and trying to understand the case being built against me. My access to Horizon's systems had been completely revoked, but I had years of personal records, backup files, and documentation of every major decision I'd made as COO. If someone was framing me for financial crimes, they'd done an incredibly thorough job. But somewhere in the evidence there would be a flaw. There always was. My phone rang constantly. Colleagues calling to ask what was going on. Friends who'd heard rumors. My brother Jake demanding to know why I wasn't staying with him instead of some depressing hotel. I ignored most of them. The only person I talked to was Raymond Shaw, a lawyer I'd gone to college with who specialized in corporate litigation. "Daniel," Raymond said when we met for coffee on day 4, "I'm going to be straight with you. The evidence they've compiled is substantial. Whoever put this together knew exactly what they were doing." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements showing deposits to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account was in my name, funded by wire transfers that appeared to come from Horizon vendors over the past 3 years. Total amount, $847,000. "I've never seen these accounts before," I said, my hands shaking as I flipped through the documents. "Raymond, I swear to God I didn't open these." "I believe you," Raymond said, "but proving it is going to be difficult. The account creation documents have your signature. The initial deposit came from your personal checking account. Someone either has access to your identity or is very good at forgery." I looked up at him. "Carter Brennan." "The intern?" Raymond raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious accusation. What makes you think he's involved?" "Because none of this started happening until he showed up," I said. "And because he's been positioning himself to replace me since day 1. I think he saw an opportunity and took it." Raymond leaned back in his chair. "You understand that sounds paranoid, right? A Stanford MBA doesn't risk federal fraud charges just to steal someone's COO position." "Then help me figure out what I'm missing," I said. "Because I know I'm not crazy, and I know I didn't steal from my own wife's company." Over the next week, Raymond and I dug into Carter Brennan's background. What we found was interesting. Before Stanford, he'd worked at 3 different startups in Silicon Valley. All 3 had experienced internal conflicts shortly after his arrival. All 3 had seen key executives pushed out under clouds of suspicion. And in all 3 cases, Carter had moved up quickly into positions of power before leaving for business school. "He's a professional saboteur," Raymond said, showing me the pattern. "This is what he does. Identifies successful companies with vulnerabilities, gets hired, creates chaos, and positions himself as the solution. Your wife's company was perfect. High valuation, founder CEO who's emotionally invested, and a COO husband who could be painted as either incompetent or corrupt." "So how do we prove it?" I asked. "We need access to Horizon's internal systems," Raymond said. "Specifically, we need to trace how those fraudulent accounts were created and funded. If Carter did this, he left a digital trail somewhere." "My access is revoked," I reminded him. Raymond smiled. "But you spent 8 years building those systems. You know every vulnerability, every backdoor, every place where security might be weak. We're not talking about hacking. We're talking about using knowledge you legitimately possess to protect yourself." 2 days later, at 2:00 a.m., I was sitting in Raymond's office with my laptop connected to a VPN, carefully navigating through Horizon's financial systems using credentials I'd never officially surrendered. What we found was even more damning than I'd imagined. The offshore accounts hadn't been created by me. They'd been created by Carter Brennan using my identity credentials, which he'd obtained by installing keylogger software on my work computer 6 weeks ago during a late night when he'd volunteered to help with a system backup. Every transaction, every document, every piece of evidence against me had been carefully manufactured by someone who understood both technology and financial fraud. But Carter had made one crucial mistake. He'd done everything from his personal laptop, which was connected to Horizon's Wi-Fi network, and that meant every action was logged on our network security system, which I designed myself 3 years ago to be deliberately redundant and impossible to completely erase. "We've got him," Raymond said, watching the data compile. "This is enough to clear you and potentially put him in federal prison." "Then let's move fast," I said, "before Victoria does something that can't be undone." The next morning I called Victoria for the first time since being thrown out. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cold and professional. "Daniel, you're supposed to communicate through legal channels." "Victoria, I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said. "Carter Brennan is the one who stole from the company. He framed me using identity theft and computer fraud. I have proof. All I'm asking is that you look at the evidence before you do anything you'll regret." There was a long pause. "Daniel, this is pathetic. You're trying to blame an intern for your own crimes?" 3 weeks ago, you trusted me with your life," I said. "With your company, with everything that mattered to you. I'm asking you to trust me for 10 more minutes. Just look at what I'm sending you." "I'm not opening anything from you," she said. "It could be malware or some attempt to cover your tracks." "Then have your IT department open it," I said. "Have your lawyers open it. Have Carter open it right in front of you. Just look at the evidence, Victoria, please." She hung up. But an hour later, Raymond received an email from Horizon's legal counsel requesting a meeting to review new information. That meeting happened the next afternoon in a conference room that I'd sat in hundreds of times before, discussing strategies and celebrating wins and planning the future. This time, I was on the opposite side of the table. Victoria sat between her lawyer and Carter Brennan, who looked slightly less confident than usual. Raymond and I sat across from them with 2 bankers' boxes full of documented evidence. "Before we begin," Victoria's lawyer said, "I want to state clearly that this meeting is being recorded and anything said can be used in legal proceedings." "Understood," Raymond replied. "We're here to present evidence that Daniel Westbrook has been the victim of identity theft and corporate fraud perpetrated by Carter Brennan, who created a sophisticated scheme to frame our client while positioning himself for advancement within Horizon Property Solutions." Carter's face remained neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. Victoria was watching him with an expression I couldn't quite read. Raymond spent the next 90 minutes walking through every piece of evidence. The keylogger software found on my work computer with installation timestamps matching nights Carter had access. The network logs showing all fraudulent transactions originated from his laptop. The digital signatures on the offshore accounts that didn't match my actual signature patterns. The communication with offshore banking representatives using email addresses Carter controlled. Most damning of all were the text messages we'd recovered from Carter's phone through a subpoena. Messages to a friend bragging about his brilliant plan to take down the COO and position himself as Victoria's right hand. Messages discussing how easy it had been to manipulate someone who was too busy being in love to pay attention. By the time Raymond finished, Victoria's face had gone completely white. She was staring at Carter like she'd never seen him before. "This is ridiculous," Carter said, but his voice had lost its usual confidence. "Those logs could be fabricated. Anyone with administrative access could have created this narrative." "Anyone except you," I said, speaking directly to him for the first time. "You're the only person in the company without administrative access, which means you couldn't have faked these logs even if you wanted to." Carter stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. Victoria, I've been nothing but loyal to you and this company. If you believe these accusations, then I'll simply resign and let you figure out the truth on your own." "Sit down," Victoria said, her voice like ice. "You're not going anywhere." Carter hesitated, then slowly lowered himself back into his chair. Victoria turned to her lawyer. "Call the police," she said. "I want him arrested for fraud, identity theft, and anything else we can charge him with." "Victoria," Carter started, his composure finally cracking. "You have to understand. I was trying to help you. Daniel was holding you back. He didn't have the vision or the courage to take Horizon to the next level. I just wanted to clear the path for you to succeed." By destroying my husband? Victoria's voice shook with anger. By making me believe the man I loved was a criminal? By almost making me throw away 12 years of marriage based on your lies? He wasn't good enough for you, Carter said desperately. I could see it from the first day. You needed someone with ambition, someone who understood your vision. Someone like me. The room went silent. Victoria stared at Carter with an expression of absolute disgust. Get out, she whispered. Get out of this building right now before I do something I'll regret. Carter looked around the room, realizing he had no allies left. He grabbed his laptop bag and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back one more time. You're making a mistake, Victoria. He'll hold you back. Just wait and see. Then he was gone. Victoria's lawyer immediately got on the phone with law enforcement while Raymond and I sat in uncomfortable silence. Victoria hadn't looked at me once since Carter left the room. Finally, she spoke. Daniel, I need to talk to you alone. Raymond gathered our materials and left. Victoria's lawyer followed, closing the door behind them. We were alone in the conference room, where we'd celebrated so many victories together. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and for the first time in 3 weeks I heard my wife's voice instead of the CEO's. I'm so sorry. I believed him over you. I threw you out of our house without even listening to your side. I almost destroyed everything we built together. Why? I asked. That's what I don't understand, Victoria. We've been together for 12 years. We've been through startup failures, financial struggles, family crises. Why was it so easy for you to believe I'd betray you? She was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Because I was afraid, she said finally. The company has been growing so fast, and I've been making decisions that affect hundreds of people's lives. Every day, I'm terrified that I'm going to make a mistake that destroys everything. And then Carter showed up with all his credentials and confidence, and he seemed to see problems I didn't see, understand risks I'd overlooked. When he showed me evidence that you were stealing, part of me almost wanted to believe it. Why would you want to believe it? I asked, genuinely confused. Because it would explain why I've been feeling so disconnected from you lately, Victoria said. We barely talk anymore except about work. We haven't had a real date in months. We sleep in the same bed, but we might as well be strangers. I think I wanted to believe you'd betrayed me because it would be easier than facing the fact that I've been neglecting our marriage. I felt something break inside my chest. She was right. We'd let the company consume everything. Every conversation was about metrics and funding and expansion. We'd stopped being husband and wife, and had become CEO and COO, business partners who shared a mortgage but had forgotten how to share a life. So where does that leave us? I asked. Victoria looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I don't know. I want to fix this, Daniel. I want to fix us. But I also know that saying sorry isn't enough. I threw you out. I believed a stranger over my own husband. I almost had you arrested based on fabricated evidence. How do we come back from that? I thought about the past 3 weeks, the humiliation of being escorted out of the office building by security, the nights in that hotel room wondering if my marriage was over, the phone calls from colleagues who'd heard I was a criminal, the damage to my reputation that would take years to fully repair. I don't know if we can, I said honestly. Victoria, you didn't just fire me from the company. You fired me from our marriage without even a conversation. That's not something I can just get over. What are you saying? She whispered. I reached into my laptop bag and pulled out 2 sets of documents I'd prepared that morning. I'm saying that I can't go back to the way things were. This situation has shown me that we've built something broken. A relationship where the company matters more than the people in it. Where an intern's opinion carries more weight than 12 years of history. I can't live like that anymore. I slid the first set of documents across the table. Divorce papers, prepared by Raymond that morning. Victoria stared at them like they were a death sentence. Daniel, no, please, we can fix this. Maybe, I said, but not by going backward. Not by pretending this didn't happen or that everything's fine now that Carter's exposed. I slid the second set of documents across the table. That's my official resignation from Horizon Property Solutions. Effective immediately. I've spent 8 years helping you build this company, but it's your company, Victoria. Your vision. Your dream. And I think it's time for both of us to figure out who we are, separate from Horizon. Victoria looked at the resignation letter, then back at the divorce papers. You're really leaving me. I'm really giving us both a chance to figure out what we actually want, I said. Because right now, I don't think either of us knows. You just found out that your intern was a sociopath who almost destroyed your marriage. I just found out that my wife was willing to throw away 12 years based on 6 weeks of manipulation. We both need time to process what that means." "How much time?" Victoria asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know I can't walk back into our house and pretend everything's normal. And I know you can't run this company effectively while we're trying to rebuild our marriage. So maybe we need to take a step back from both and see what's left when the dust settles." Victoria started to say something, then stopped. She looked down at the documents in front of her, then back at me. For the first time in weeks, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. Not the brilliant CEO or the driven entrepreneur, but just Victoria. Scared, hurt, and finally being honest about it. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, we'll do this your way. But Daniel, I'm not signing those divorce papers yet. I'm going to do everything I can to prove to you that our marriage is worth saving. Even if it takes months or years, I'm going to fight for us the way I should have fought for you when Carter made his accusations." I stood up to leave. At the door, I turned back one more time. "Victoria, I hope you're right. I really do. Because despite everything, I still love you. I'm just not sure love is enough anymore." 3 weeks after that meeting, I sat in a coffee shop watching the news break on my phone. Carter Brennan had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and computer crimes. The FBI had discovered he'd run similar schemes at 4 other companies before Horizon, always targeting executives he viewed as obstacles to his advancement. His pattern was sophisticated, illegal, and had finally caught up with him. He was looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Saw the news. Justice finally served. How are you doing?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'm okay. Staying with my brother. Started consulting with some smaller startups. Figuring out who I am outside of Horizon." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "I'm proud of you, and I miss you every single day." "I miss you too," I typed back. "But I still need more time. I'll wait as long as it takes." I set down my phone and looked out the window at the people walking past. Some of them were probably dealing with their own betrayals, their own broken relationships, their own moments of crisis when everything they thought they knew turned out to be a lie. But they were still walking, still moving forward, still finding ways to survive. That was the thing about betrayal. It didn't just break your trust in other people, it broke your trust in yourself, in your ability to judge situations and read people and protect yourself from harm. Victoria hadn't just thrown me out of the company. She'd shown me that I'd been blind to what was happening in my own marriage, in my own life, and that was something I couldn't fix by just going back to the way things were. 6 months later, Victoria and I met for dinner. Not at some fancy restaurant where we used to celebrate business wins, but at a small Italian place in a neighborhood neither of us had ever visited. Neutral ground, where we could be just 2 people trying to figure out if they still had a future together. She looked different. Softer somehow, less polished. She'd started therapy after the Carter situation, she told me. Had hired a new COO to run daily operations at Horizon so she could focus on strategy and actually have a life outside the office. Had started painting again, something she'd loved in college, but had abandoned when building the company. I told her about my consulting work, about how freeing it felt to work with smaller companies where success wasn't measured in millions, but in whether people were building something they believed in. About rediscovering hobbies I'd forgotten I enjoyed. About learning to be okay with being alone. "Are you happier?" Victoria asked as we shared tiramisu for dessert. I thought about it. "I'm different. I don't know if that's the same as happier, but I'm more myself than I've been in years. I'm not just your COO or your husband. I'm Daniel, and that's been good for me." "I'm different too," she said. "And I think I'm starting to understand what went wrong. I built my entire identity around Horizon, made it the most important thing in my life. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that the reason I started the company was to have a better life, not to sacrifice my life to the company." We talked for another hour, carefully avoiding the question that hung between us. Where do we go from here? Finally, as we walked to our cars, Victoria stopped and turned to face me. "Daniel, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I destroyed your trust in the worst possible way. but I want you to know that I've spent every day of the past 6 months trying to become someone worthy of your trust again. Not the person I was, but someone better. Someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes. I believe you, I said. But Victoria, I need you to understand something. Even if we get back together, even if we rebuild our marriage, I'm never coming back to Horizon. That part of our life is over. The company is yours. I have my own path now. She nodded. I understand. And honestly, I think that's how it should be. We need separate identities, separate successes. Otherwise, we'll just fall back into the same patterns. So where does that leave us? I asked. Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. It leaves us taking it slow, dating like we did 12 years ago when we were just two people who liked each other. No pressure, no expectations, just seeing if we can find our way back to each other. I'd like that, I said. And I meant it. The divorce papers never got signed. Victoria and I spent the next year rebuilding our relationship from the ground up. We went on actual dates, took trips that had nothing to do with business, learned to talk about things that mattered beyond metrics and funding rounds. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the hurt and betrayal threatened to pull us back into old patterns. But we kept pushing forward, kept choosing each other even when it was hard. Carter Brennan pleaded guilty to all charges and is currently serving 12 years in federal prison. His story became a cautionary tale in business schools about the dangers of toxic ambition and corporate sabotage. Horizon Property Solutions eventually went public, but Victoria had learned to build a company culture that valued integrity over growth at any cost. As for me, my consulting firm grew into something I never expected. I worked with founders who were trying to build sustainable companies without sacrificing their personal lives. I became known as someone who could help companies scale while maintaining their values. It wasn't as flashy as being COO of a $180 million company, but it was mine. And that made all the difference. The truth about betrayal is that it forces you to choose. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it reveal who you really are beneath all the roles and expectations and images you've built. Victoria and I both chose revelation. We let Carter's betrayal strip away everything that wasn't real, everything that wasn't worth keeping. What remained was smaller, quieter, but infinitely more valuable. A marriage built on honesty instead of habit. Careers that reflected our actual values instead of our ambitions. Lives that we'd chosen rather than lives that had happened to us while we were busy building something else. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the thing that saves you. You just have to be willing to let the old version of yourself die so something better can be born. And that's exactly what we did.